It is Soulbound Day. I am very excited to conclude the series with Soulbound. So, for those that don't know, I've been doing a series where I'm introducing players to new games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons. Not because we hate Dungeons and Dragons, but there's a lot of cool systems that people probably don't know about. The reason I've been doing Soulbound last is because this is the game I'm currently playing. So I've been running a Pathfinder game for about 2.5 years. We finally finished Strength of Thousands. We decided to start playing Soulbound, and we are all having a blast with it. This is a very, very fun system. I recommend. Now, if you don't know what Soulbound is based off the Age of Sigmar, which is like Warhammer Fantasy, but the tabletop game for it. Now, to play the game, you don't have to know Age of Sigmar. I don't know Age of Sigmar, and I've actually been playing for a bit. But I'm learning as we play along, because there are people in our group that do know the lore, the story, and characters, and that helps a lot. So I do recommend you have at least one person in your group that knows Warhammer, or Age of Sigmar, and that person should probably be the GM. If nobody in your group knows what Age of Sigmar is, probably learn that first, and then you can try this campaign out. But the idea of Soulbound is that it's based in Age of Sigmar world, and your character's souls are all bound together through a ritual. Now, I think in the adventure pass, it doesn't actually have you do the ritual. It assumes you're already soulbound. I would recommend actually going through a little RP segment for the soulbound. So I did a journal series for episode 1 if you want to go see how my group did that. But pretty much your souls are all put into a blender and then put back into your bodies. And after you are soulbound, your souls cannot be claimed by anyone else because they're bound to each other. And it can't really ever be undone. Once you're in a soulbound, you can't just take your soul back because parts of your soul are with others and you've got each other's souls in you. But it makes your characters powerful. You are already in it because Age of Sigmar is a very epic world, and it kind of pushes your characters to higher levels of epicness through the soul binding. Now, not every character can be soulbound. Certain things if you are playing a Stormcast Eternal, which is one of the species are the terms for races or ancestries, your soul is already bound to a god, so it cannot be bound to the soul binding. I personally recommend you pick a species that can be part of the soul binding, because I just think it's more fun when everyone's kind of in the same pot. And there's a few resources that if you're in the soulbound, you can use. If you're not in the soulbound, you don't even get to vote on how your resources are used because your soul isn't part of that binding. There's also several books. These are going to be more relevant to people that play Age of Sigmar, for the forces of order, of death, of destruction. I personally have only read through the order books because I'm playing a character of order. Specifically, I'm playing a K-Knight Shadowstalker, which is a stealthy boy that worships a murder god. I promise we are the good guys. Yeah. But yeah, if you're new to the system, probably pick a Forces of Order just because it's a little bit easier to roleplay out, and it's probably easier for you to understand what a Duradin is, which is just a dwarf. But it's a dwarf that can't be sued by the Tolkien estate, which is why it's very important that it's a Duradin and something different. But getting to how the system works. So first of all, I'm going to try not to go too hard into the mechanics of the system because that would be a separate video. I'm just going to go through the overview of this is what you do for character creation. These are things to consider, the very basic surface level things to know if you're interested in playing. So first of all, the way experience works in this game is that your character sets goals, and when they meet those goals, they get experience for it. So you are supposed to work with your GM at the start of every session and at the end, but my group just does everything at the beginning, to set your goals for your character. And when you complete your individual goals or complete a party goal, you get experience. And you can spend your experience to build up your character, kind of like Mutants in Mastermind, because it's not like you get a level in Fighter like Dungeons & Dragons. You could spend 2 experience on whatever you want, right? This is a really cool system, though, because goals can be very individualistic. You can create conflict in the party if you want to do that, but you can also create compromise in a party. So my character was sort of having a theological dilemma where they worship this murder blood god. But we were soulbound by Sigmar, which is like the kind of the classical god of like, I guess he's the god of storms, but humans worship him. The basic, yeah. But we had another character in our party that was a priestess, and she helped me through the identity crisis. This worked out really well because this solved my long-term goal, but was a short-term goal that she was able to set up, and now our characters have had a moment to kind of bond together. Similarly, you could just make goals that are cinematic. So we've got somebody in our party that their background is that they like hunted like sea serpents and these giant monsters. So part of their goals right now is that they want to fight a like gigantic creature to kind of like prove their battle prowess. So you could set up cinematic goals, you can create story goals, work with your GM. Not recommended in the book, but one thing I actually do recommend you do is also have longer term goals. I just think this is something to keep in mind for what your character would do in the future that you're probably never going to reach. So certain things like my character would probably want to go back to his clergy that he left behind and kind of prove himself and earn their respect again. But the storyline we're going has us going to a different part of the world and we cannot come back for a very long time. So I think it's good to have long-term goals that are reasonable for your character to finish, and then like longer-term goals for like, what would your character do if they had a year of downtime? Which is unrealistic, but I digress. Races in this game are called species, but they're all the same thing. So baseline, there are humans, which are human. Yeah, you know what a human is. Why am I stuttering on this? Stormcast Eternals, which are like reforged in lightning and their souls are bound to the god Sigmar. You Aelves, which are not elves. Duradin, which are not dwarves. And Sylvaneth, which are like tree people. I think in lore they were wood elves that have been like magically transformed. I think. I don't know. Nobody in our party plays this species, so I don't know them very well. My party also has an orc, which is not typically what you would have in our party. But if you watch my journal series, you understand that I actually am having a lot of fun with how the players are RPing this character. I really like him. So we have an orc in our party that my soul is bound to. It's weird, but we love our orc friend. Next thing for setup is once you have your species figured out is you can do your archetype. Archetypes are kind of like classes, but they're more like starting points and recommendations. I think these are good for new players and like players that know the story very well. Because if you're a new player like me and you don't know the world very well, you can just read through the archetypes. And I found Cainite Status Shulkers, and I'm like, ooh, these are stealthy boys. I want to play a stealthy roguish boy. So I just chose that archetype, which tells you what kind of like talents and skills and stuff it would recommend you start with, and you have your character. Similarly, if you're a fan of like you actually play the tabletop with like the minis and everything, you probably want to play as somebody from your faction. And the archetype is like, here's your faction character, and it's great. Similarly, you can just say, none of these archetypes really work for me, and you can work with your DM and just start from 0 experience and build a character out freely. I think the priest in our group, I think that's what they did, where they just built their character from scratch. So you can totally do that if you prefer it. Then your attributes. So Dungeons & Dragons has its 6, like strength, dex, con, and everything. This system has 3, but they're very important. So the 3 attributes are body, which would be like your strength, dex, con, your mind, which is intelligence, kind of charisma, and then your soul, which is wisdom, kind of charisma. And they really do about what you would think. But the way they're used is in combination with your skills. So getting to skills, skills are really the same thing you would expect them in Dungeons & Dragons. If you want a character to be able to stealth, like my character, then you spend your experience to level up your skill in stealth. Every skill can have up to 3 points in its training and then 3 points in its focus. Training is arguably more important than focus, but you don't want to ignore that. I will get into how training and focus works later on in the video when we actually talk about like what a die roll would be. And then you have talents, which are like the very last of building your character. Talents are like feats. There's quite a few of them. But the feats are very specific. There's not a lot of feats that are just generally good for anyone. But they kind of augment your skills or maybe give you new options. So as an example, my stealthy boy has a feat, or a talent, sorry, called Backstab. Since my character's action economy means I have to stealth and then attack from stealth, I only get to attack about once for everybody else in my party attacking twice. But the Backstab trait says if you attack from stealth and you're using a subtle weapon, which is going to be less damage, like a dagger, you deal double damage and ignore armor, which without that talent, my build just doesn't work, right? So it completely enables my character to have that. Similarly, you could pick a ranged character and take something like Hail of Doom that allows you to make a ranged attack against everybody in a specific zone instead of just hitting one person at a time. You absolutely do not have to have this as a ranged character, but if you spend experience on it, it's a different option that you might use in combat. So yeah, the talents are cool to read through. And then finally, the most mechanical thing we're going to talk about is how rolls work in this system. So anytime you are trying to roll a die, it's called a test. And your game master will give you like a difficulty for the test, depending on if it's easy or not. And your DM will tell you something like, I'm going to give it a 4-2. What this means is you're going to roll a pool of dice based on your attribute plus your skill training and try to get successes. So if I'm rolling a stealth check, I'm going to roll body, because it's a physical skill, and stealth, right? So whatever, like if I have 3 ranks in body and 2 in my skill training, then I roll 5 dice. Now getting back to that 4-2, what 4-2 means is that you are looking for a 4 or higher on your die roll, and you need at least 2 successes. If you've played like Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar, whatever, this is familiar to you. If you haven't played it, this probably sounds really weird, because it kind of is. But it's once you like play your first session, it'll be easy. You'll get it, I promise. The way focus comes into play now is that training as the number of die you get to roll for your skill. Focus says if you have like 1 point in focus, that's a +1 to any die in your pool. So if you're looking for a 4 or higher and you roll a 3, you can say, I'm going to spend 1 of my focus to turn this 3 into a 4. Or if you have 2 focus, you could turn a 2 into a 4, or 2 3s into a 4. So rolling more die is typically better, but once you get to the point in your character where you're rolling lots of die for stuff, focus becomes a lot better. Focus also might be a requirement for certain talents, so you pay attention to those requirements. Like I said, the roll system is weird, especially for combat. It gets more complicated for combat. But once you've gone through your first session, you'll understand. It's not too bad, but it is different. Also, I should have said this at the start. This is a D6 system, right? If you're really new and don't know what I mean by a D6 system, that means that the primary die you're going to be rolling in this game is a D6, like a 6-sided die. In this game, you don't actually roll anything else. But we would say like Dungeons & Dragons is a D20 system because you roll a 20-sided die for the majority of things. Simple enough. And like I said, there's way more I could go into in this video, but I'm trying not to mechanically explain things here, although I could make that video if like, people ask for it. I'm just trying to explain that Soulbound is a really cool system set in a very, very epic story. And if you've got people in your party, in your group that plays Age of Sigmar or Warhammer Fantasy, you will probably really love this game. If nobody in your group plays, respectfully, you might consider playing something else. Just because it's going to be really hard to set up a universe when you don't know what's going on. And the world is a little bit complicated. It's high fantasy, though. It's very cool. I digress. This is the last video in the series. There are other games that I've played, like Fabula Ultima, but I haven't played enough of them that I feel like I can recommend them and be honest about it. So there might be future videos in the series, but right now I'm done. If you have liked this video or if you have liked this series, please consider subscribing because I would really appreciate that. I've been setting aside time to set up these videos and plan what I'm going to say. I have like a huge sticky note of a sort of like loose script on here that took a lot of time. So if you're enjoying this stuff, subscribe because I would appreciate it. And leave a comment if there's something you want a deeper dive into, or somebody in like my Pathfinder video for the series recommended like, you didn't talk about this enough. I was like, that's a good point, and I made an entire video on that because the commenter was right. So I appreciate all the support. I will still keep making videos, but this series is done for now. So thanks for the support. I appreciate it. See ya.